Hey everybody, Morgan Godwin here. Still very new to YouTube, so help me out. Take it easy on me. Again, friendly reminder, carry Narcan, save lives. Don't use alone. Check your drugs. All right, so today I want to talk to you about why and how I went crazy after I got out of prison. And I mean that quite literally. I had a psychotic episode, and I am not ashamed to admit it. So in prison, I developed adaptations that were suitable to the environment in which I lived. Okay, hypervigilance being the primary one. Always aware of my surroundings, listening for noises happening around me. Who's on shift? Where's the cop? Where's this? And then something else unique to my experiences because of FCI Dublin. While I was there, they installed new fire alarms. Sounds standard, right? They were faulty. Light was refracting through the windows and triggering the fire alarms multiple times a day for months. Now, in the daytime, they would make us evacuate. At night, they would prohibit us from evacuating because they couldn't have a crowd of us out there because then they'd have to redo count and do the paperwork. So the strobing light, the screeching noise, evacuating multiple times a day. So I had to sleep fully dressed because you never knew what was going to happen. You always had to be fully dressed. Always had to pay attention to what was going on around me. I'd never seen a fist fight really before prison where I saw maybe 1 or 2 a week, seeing a girl get her teeth kicked out, cleaning blood out of my cell after my cellie had a fight in there. And that's just not stuff that was normal to me in my middle class upbringing. I learned to handle arguments with my words, but that doesn't really matter in prison, especially because in that federal prison, they just lock you up and threw away the key. Like the guards left us, it was Lord of the Flies in there. So whoever was most dominant was going to succeed. Like when the air conditioning went out and it was like 100 degrees in our cells, there was 2 or 3 fans on the unit, and whoever could throw down got the fan. Like, it was like gladiator stuff. I'd never seen anything like it. And then the guards would yell at you if you didn't turn the TV off for count time, but didn't care about any of that other stuff that actually mattered. But they also didn't care that we were having sex rampantly and doing other things. So pros and cons to everything. Chaos is a facet of prison. The rules change every day. One day, I can bring my salt, hot sauce, and pepper into food service. The next day I have that in my hand. They deny me entrance into food service because they say no condiments are allowed. The next day they say you can have 1 condiment. One day, you line up here. And then the next day everyone's lined up there and they open the side door. And then everybody rushes because they've been waiting in line for an hour. And then a fight happens. It's just perpetual chaos, right? And you always have to be paying attention to the sounds around you and who might be coming up behind you. It's a women's prison. It's not that violent, but people are unpredictable. You get fishbowl syndrome, right? You live in a fishbowl, but you think it's the whole sea. So everything's a really big deal. There's a lot of drama. Most fights are from girlfriends, right? Domestic violence in romantic relationships, cheating, stuff like that. So I wasn't super susceptible to that because I'm not that messy. I mean, I'm kind of messy, but I'm not that messy, right? So I didn't have to deal with any of that, but it was happening around me. And you have no privacy, and you're sharing a cell that was meant for 1 person with 3 people. So there's no floor space, there's no privacy, you share the toilet. And so you're just constantly aware, and you're constantly aware of the cops and who's on shift, because some of them are just cruel, malicious, out to get you. One defining incident that I can remember as having inflicted PTSD on me. It doesn't even sound that serious when I recount it, but count time was at 4 p.m. and they have a PA, right? They say, count time, count time, count time. Everybody in your rooms, count time. But Mr. Poole, I'm gonna call you out because I will never forget you or your face. He played a game. He wouldn't announce count time. Okay? He would just hope that everybody went to their rooms. Now, what he was hoping is that you didn't, or that you weren't standing at your door at exactly 4 p.m. or 4:18 p.m. or 4:21 p.m., whenever he decided to walk by. If you were not standing, now remember, we can't stand shoulder to shoulder because the cell's not big enough, so you got to like stagger. If we were not standing there, he would give us a shot. A shot is a write-up. I don't know why it's called a shot. That's what they call it in the feds. And a shot could take your halfway house time. You're going to do more time in prison if you get a shot for something silly like that, right? So I had laid down to take a nap because I'd done really intense cardio that morning. I'll never forget this. But I'm a light sleeper, right? Because I learned to pay attention to all the sounds around me. I didn't know Mr. Poole was going to be on shift. I could have set the alarm on my watch, but I didn't. And so, I don't know what time it was, maybe 4:08 p.m. I woke up to him in his steel-toed boots, kicking my open door over and over and over and screaming at me because I was laying down asleep during count time. Screaming bloody murder, like he was mad, like he was angry, like he was personally offended, like I had disrespected him because I was not standing. When he did that on purpose, he's the only one that chose not to use the PA to announce count time. But like I'm saying, perpetual chaos. All right, so I get out of prison. I start at Portland State University. I'm in a halfway house. In the morning, I go to school. In the afternoon, I go to work at a pizza place. And at night, I come home to the halfway house where I am patted down, passed through a metal detector, and asked to pull down my pants and pee into a cup while someone watches. But I wasn't in prison, so that felt pretty good, you know. I started to notice I had some anxieties. I struggled with technology. I didn't know how to use my phone. Apps had changed. I didn't know how to use a Google Doc. I didn't know how to use my university's online platform. But in prison, I had been very heavily supervised and censored because of my political leanings and the fact that I would get outside pressure on the prison, right? Contacting my legislatures, advocacy organizations. So they always threatened to put me in the shoe for what I was writing in emails, even though it was always 100% true. Okay, so I lived with incredible censorship, and I will never forget the day that an officer made a joke about something he'd overheard on one of my phone calls, one of my private phone calls, you know. So I had these fears, hypervigilance, paranoia, supervision paranoia. So I started to think that the feds had probably continued to censor me like they had in prison and had definitely tapped my phone. I started to think that cops were tailing me. Now, mind you, I'm going from school to work to the halfway house. But something about that, because I'm jumping worlds, right? Portland State University, super progressive university, like everyone's queer. I felt so comfortable. And then I would get home to the halfway house that night and I'm there in the TV room and the guy in front of me, he's got a bald head, right? Big head, giant swastika tattooed on his scalp. And that's my home. That's where I lived by force. According to the Bureau of Prisons, I had to reside in that halfway house. So super progressive Portland State University in the morning, swastikas at night. And then just this ongoing fear. Couldn't leave the halfway house without a pass. Had to have your destination. They're going to check up on you at any moment. And I lived with so much fear, I always felt like I was just a hair away from going back to prison, even though I wasn't doing anything wrong. But it doesn't take you doing anything wrong to go back to prison. You can go back on a technicality like that. And they didn't like me. I was political. I pissed them off. So I was terrified of their retribution. So then it got weird. My paranoia ratcheted up more and more every day, but instead of taking a step back, relaxing, I needed to push through. I had classes, I had work, I had something to prove. I am not a worthless junkie. I am not a criminal. And so I kept doing all my things, working 40 hours a week, going to school full time, doing everything, and getting more and more paranoid. It culminated in one day when I thought everyone was staring at me. I was on campus at my urban university, walking down a street in downtown Portland, and everyone was looking right at me. Some of them were pointing. People were taking pictures of me. And I thought it was real. It felt so real. Then I got in my car and I found a bug. They had bugged my car. I tore it out. I called my best friend from prison, Lisa. She asked me to send her a picture of the bug I had found, and I sent it to her. And she said, Morgan, that's your Bluetooth mic. That's your aftermarket Bluetooth from the stereo deck you had installed. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going crazy. So I wanted to take a walk in nature, right? So on the way home, I stop and I take a walk through Forest Park. And I was sure that there were people hiding in the bushes. I had a pocket knife on me, which I shouldn't have, but I felt so in danger all the time, I started carrying one. I pulled the pocket knife out and opened it, ready to fight back at whoever was about to jump out at me. There was no one in the bushes. My PTSD and constant hypervigilance had led to a psychotic episode. I walked into the VA the next day. Thank God I am eligible for VA healthcare, socialized medicine, because I am technically a military veteran. So I don't know if that makes me a patriot or a communist, but it means I was able to get the mental health treatment I needed immediately. I saw a psychologist who specialized in PTSD for combat veterans, which made me feel guilty since my PTSD was coming from addiction in prison. And I was able to regain my mental health without needing to be hospitalized, but it was very close. And I think back on those moments where I broke with reality because of my prison PTSD. And I think of all the men who were in prisons far more violent than me, and all the people who don't have VA healthcare, or in the states where you don't have expanded Medicaid and you can't even get mental health care when you get out. Or even if you do have insurance, mental health care has been so devalued. I could have hurt someone else, could have hurt myself. I've always struggled with suicidal ideation. I still struggle with PTSD. You know, loud noises, I'm still always looking around. I'll probably struggle the rest of my life, but you know what? It gets easier. I have more good days than bad. That's it. That's my story about how I went crazy after getting out of prison. If you need mental health treatment, seek it out. There is no shame.